In this sport, you don't wait for judges to decide your fate. TenexToken puts you in control. Stake instantly, speculate discreetly, and keep your moves private. TenexToken. Play smart, play discreet.
Andrew McCart, IFLTV, delighted. For the first time in a long time, it seems, Mr. Dan Rafael. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Andrew. It's been like, I don't know, like 3 weeks maybe.
But nothing's happened in the boxing industry. Nothing's happening, Dan. That's the thing. I like to get, when there's something happening in the boxing world, I like to get you on because you speak with authority and you speak from the heart, so to speak. And I like to get you on all the time. But these last 3 weeks, it just seems, for lack of a better word, bleh.
Yeah, it's been it's pretty low key. I mean, in at least in American boxing through the years, we were sort of used to having like less of a schedule, let's say, at this time of year. A lot of times the networks, particularly I'm talking about back in the day, we're going back now, it's, been 7-8 years since HBO has had fights, and 3 years or so since Showtime. But they would purposely try to avoid this time of year to stay away from the major college football that we have on Saturday, American football, not to mention they were always fearful of scheduling on a Saturday night, let's say, against a Major League Baseball with our playoffs and the World Series. But, that went away. And even though that it's become more commonplace, there's still a decided lack of activity at the moment.
Well, there is some activity here in the UK. We've got a fight down in London between Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley. Now, I do want to break the fight down and the implications at the tail end of this and who gets Usyk and the mandatory and whatnot. But the fight itself, obviously, you know Joseph Parker very well. You've covered probably a few of his fights anyway. But what do you know of Fabio Wardley going into this fight?
Well, I've been following Fabio Wardley ever since he's been showing up on the Queensberry cards. I mean, I'm familiar with him. I think when he started out, a lot of people sort of they didn't make judgments because they weren't sure what he was all about. He certainly looked like he could play the part. He had the great size. And he had, it seemed to everybody in those first few fights. But again, you have to understand when you're in those early fights, you're not really fighting top quality opposition. But he certainly was showing punching power. And especially in the heavyweight division, that's going to get a lot of people excited when you're mowing guys down and scoring spectacular kind of knockouts. So that sort of was the calling card that he had. And he's continued to develop. And if you looked into his background, you knew this is not a heavyweight coming into the pro game off of a big-time amateur career. Like, for example, like when Anthony Joshua comes into the pros, everybody knows, okay, here's the Olympic gold medal winner. Fabio Wardley does not have that type of background. He was, doing white-collar kind of boxing matches and really didn't have any kind of significant amateur career. So the jury was kind of out, whereas the top amateurs, there are expectations. Some guys live up to it, some guys didn't. So everything that Wardley has done, I think a lot of people would look at it and say he's been a little bit of an overachiever. But he's made his way and he's been involved in some good fights. He had that fantastic battle, turned out to be a draw back in the first match he had against Frazier Clark. But then when he had the rematch and he just annihilated him in the first round, I think that opened a lot of people's eyes. And then he looked good against Adelaide in Saudi Arabia, a fight that going into the match, I think my recollection is that, that was sort of like perceived as like a 50-50-ish kind of fight, two up-and-coming guys from Britain who were undefeated that, maybe could to take the next step. And it was Fabio Wardley who did that and looked good doing so. And then he's continued to make his way. And in the fight he had in his most recent fight against Hearn, big expectations, right? He's fighting at home. He's the so-called A side of the main event. It's an outdoor stadium. It's kind of a biggish deal. They're fighting for in front of a big crowd. And he's, the WBA interim title is at stake. If you value that in any way, shape, or form, which, unfortunately I find kind of hard to do at this point. But nonetheless, I think some people kind of forgot what happened there. Like he was really getting outboxed, all around the ring, but he has that great dramatic punching power. He was able to rescue that fight. He was weighed down on the scorecards and he scored a spectacular knockout. And in the heavyweight division, especially, if you can do that, no matter how far behind you get in a fight, you always have that chance. And it's maybe more than just the puncher's chance, because at some point you're going to land a heavy punch in a boxing match over 12 rounds. He did that against when he got the job done, but now he's going in against Parker, who is a whole different level, it seems to me. But I expect a good fight in this one, as far as just the anticipation of the possibility of there being excellent action and perhaps a dramatic knockout.
Joseph Parker, then, for me, the run that he's been on with the Wilder win, the Zhang win, the Bacoli win, albeit Bacoli 20, 36 hours notice, whatever it may be, but still a good win nonetheless.
Sure.
He's on a fine run of form. So is Joseph Parker, for you, when you look at that heavyweight scene right now, is he number 2 or number 3 in the heavyweight division right now?
Well, he's certainly way up there. I mean, obviously, by universally recognized, both in terms of the wins and the belts and everything about it. Usyk is number 1. I don't think there's any argument. I mean, boxing fans can't agree on anything, but I think that's one thing that we can all agree on, that Alexander Usyk is the number 1 heavyweight in the world. Besides that, yeah, it seems like Joseph Parker probably is a good pick. I mean, if you go on the fact that Tyson Fury's retired, you have Dubois, who just got wrecked by Usyk, not just once, but twice. You have Anthony Joshua, who hasn't fought for a year, and his last fight was a devastating knockout to Dubois. Deontay Wilder has had one win against a very low-level opponent this year. He's sort of like 1 foot in retirement, although he does plan to fight, but I don't think you could put him number 2, especially with a loss to Parker. Zhang, same sort of situation, lost to Parker in the not-too-distant past. And you just kind of go down that list of fighters. Who's another candidate that you could even put number 2?
I mean, people are saying Ajit Kabayel, but I don't think he's had the wins like Parker.
He's probably right behind him, I guess. I mean, he's probably, if you're not going to rank Fury because of supposed retirement, you could maybe still put Joshua ahead of him ahead of Kabayel, but I don't know about that, because, like you said, Kabayel, he's got some better wins. He's got some more recent wins, I guess, that are more meaningful. But yeah, I think Joseph Parker, not only as the WBO's interim title holder, but as the mandatory challenger that's due next for Alexander Usyk, as well as the record that he's put that together with, if he has the victory on Saturday against Wardley, I don't know who else you could select to be the not only the actual mandatory, but let's call him the people's mandatory, that regardless of what your appointment is by some sanctioning body or by virtue of you having an interim title belt, if you examine the rest of the weight class and you take into account their recent results, Joseph Parker's the guy. I had an interview, Andrew, with Joseph Parker on my podcast that is on our Big Fight Weekend YouTube channel, and we talked about that. And one of the things I asked Joe about was, do you think that if you beat Fabio Wardley, do you deserve the next chance to fight for the undisputed heavyweight championship? And, he said he did. And he gave credit. He actually mentioned, he says, I'm not the only one. There's other guys. And he mentioned Kabayel specifically. In my perspective to Joe, and this is nothing anti-Kabayel, I said, okay, I don't disagree that Kabayel deserves an opportunity also, but that Joseph Parker deserves the opportunity first, most. And I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I could probably agree with you on that one. But, Dan, you've been in the sport a long, long, long time. I don't want to say your age, but you've been in the sport a long, long time. When you look at somebody like Usyk and where he is at his career, does Usyk want to fight a dangerous? And let's be it, Joseph Parker's only 33 years old, so he's still relatively young for a heavyweight. And if he does go on and beat Fabio Wardley in great fashion, let's say, is Usyk sent at home watching that being, yeah, I'll fight him, where he is at his career? Or do you see that belt becoming vacant and then Joe fighting for the vacant belt?
Well, first of all, if Joe wouldn't fight for the vacant belt, whoever wins the fight on Saturday, be it Joseph Parker to retain the WBO interim title or Fabio Wardley to win the WBO interim title, they are the next mandatory. The WBO has stated on multiple occasions, I have spoken personally with Gustavo Oliveri, who is the president of the WBO, and has stated repeatedly that the winner of that fight is next. And if Usyk does not want to fight the winner, I mean, they can't make a guy fight, then that title will be taken away from Usyk, and the winner of that fight will be elevated from the interim champion to the full champion. So the winner of Saturday's fight is either going to fight Usyk in the next match or is going to be elevated to the full champion. I mean, I guess, could there theoretically be some type of agreement where they allowed them to step aside and everybody was on the same page with it? I guess that's possible, but it seems unlikely. So there won't be a guy that's going to have to fight for that title. This, in essence, that's what interim titles sometimes have become in this sport, is that, and it's particularly noticeable in terms of certain WBO fights and certain IBF fights, is that they fight for interim titles before and then they get elevated. Like they fill the vacancy before it's actually vacant. It's happened on a number of occasions. But yeah, Joseph Parker or Fabio is going to become the mandatory, or in Joe's case, still be the mandatory, and then Usyk will have to fight the guy. Now, in terms of what Usyk is going to do, I mean, a lot of people have sort of thought, okay, maybe he'll give up the title, maybe he'll retire. It seemed pretty unclear. But he just recently, in the last few days, on his own website, made comments saying, "I'm going to fight till I'm 41. I'm not, he's been coming off of, he's back in training after several months since the Dubois fight, dealing with the I won't call it even like an injury, but a back issue is the way that his team referred to it. They got the exception to the mandatory to extend the length of time. That's the reason why Parker and Wardley are fighting, is because he was not going to be ready to defend against Parker within the time frame that the WBO had outlined. So they allowed the interim title to be at stake, and and for them to go and do this fight with Wardley. But the good thing is that Usyk plans to fight. He said he'll be back in 2026. And if you follow Alexander Usyk's career, and I've done so since the day I've followed his career even at the latter stages of his amateur career. He's not a guy that's been ducking people. He fought the guys he had to fight. He fought his mandatories when necessary. He fought Dubois when he was the mandatory. He lived up to the contract obligation in the rematch against Fury. So there's nothing in Alexander Usyk's background that says he's going to look to avoid anybody. Particularly, it's one thing, and I'll use an example. I'll date myself a bit. Go back in the day when Lennox Lewis was heavyweight champion. He had won the undisputed title when he defeated Evander Holyfield. And he was supposed to have a mandatory of the WBA against John Ruiz. Now, John Ruiz was by no means a popular figure. He was not a necessarily economic force that was going to bring Lennox any particular riches. He wasn't a particularly pleasing fighter to watch. He didn't have a lot of big wins. And so he was not really interested to fight him. And there was a much, much bigger money fight, a fight that had been built up on HBO, a fight that was going to be worth, obviously, a huge amount of money, a fighter that had been involved in some exciting fights, and that was Michael Grant. And so Lennox Lewis basically allowed himself to be, I forget if he was stripped or he vacated, whatever it was, but the WBA title went away, and he fought Michael Grant, a big, huge fight. That was a big pay-per-view, and Lennox made, a lot more money to do that fight than he would have against John Ruiz. But the good thing, as far as Usyk is concerned, is that if he's looking for his next fight, Joseph Parker's not the John Ruiz figure in this story, if you will. He's a reputable guy. He's a somewhat popular figure, particularly in the UK, where he's got a fan base because of all the fights he's had there. He's been involved in some good fights. He's a very reputable guy. He's got the wins to back it up. You mentioned in just the last 3 fights alone, Martin Bakole and Zhang and Deontay Wilder. The British public knows him from a mega event against Anthony Joshua. He's fought other fights in the UK as well. So to make a long story short, when Usyk comes back, and if Joseph Parker is the winner, I don't see any reason why you would look and say he wouldn't fight him. I think that fight is a very sellable, marketable fight. Now, does it put 90,000 in Wembley Stadium? I'm skeptical about that. But could they put it in, make a big card and stack it up with the Brits on undercards? Because obviously, you have a Ukrainian against an Australian, New Zealand, I should say, in that matchup. You'd have to maybe pump it up a little bit with some other fights on the show. But could they put it? It's a sellout automatically in a place like, the O2 where Saturday's fight is, or in Manchester, or, pick an arena anywhere in the country. But yeah, it's a marketable fight.
Listen, I kind of want to see it. I would like to see Joe get that fight. I think knowing Joe, and you speaking to Joe as well, how likable the man is and how honest he is. And do you know what I mean? I think he deserves a crack at Usyk. Now, staying on Usyk, now I do want to get your thoughts on it. Now, I know you know Max Kellerman very well, and he seemed to get a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it backlash on his comments saying that Usyk's sort of heavyweight run is very, very thin, and he compared him to Muhammad Ali and stuff like that. I just want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, Max Kellerman I like Max Kellerman because he goes against the grain. If that's safe to say. Like, I've seen him when he used to do, what was that show with Stephen A. back when he talked about American football and basketball?
Yeah, First Take.
First Take, that was it. He always went against the grain, and he wasn't scared to maybe ruffle a few feathers. And it seems like he's not scared to do this in the boxing game as well. And I just want to get your thoughts on his comments.
Well, Max has never been fearful of voicing his opinion about boxing or anything else. That's one of the reasons why he's a popular pundit, whether it's been boxing or, like you said, when he was doing the show with First Take. And, when they would do boxing stuff on First Take, I've been friends with Max Kellerman for 25 years. I've known and been friendly with Stephen A. Smith for not quite as long, but we worked together for many years at ESPN. We're still in touch. I appeared on First Take with them together many times for the major fights. So for Max to come out with a boxing opinion, that's what he's supposed to do. Turkey Al Sheikh has him hosting the new program that he's doing on DAZN. And it doesn't surprise me that he has his opinion. Max has been doing that ever since he did it in New York back in the day when he came on the scene nationally, when he started to be the studio co-host of the old ESPN2 series, Friday Night Fights. This is back in like 1998 or so when that series premiered. I first met Max in 2000. And trust me, we've had 1,000 just conversations between the two of us, either in person or on the telephone, giving our opinions about boxing. So the fact that he would come out and say his opinion is not a surprise. The fact that Max has an opinion that not everybody agrees with is not a surprise. But listen, the man is educated about boxing. I respect his knowledge of the sport. If that's his opinion, that he believes that Usyk's resume at heavyweight is a little bit thin, that's his opinion. Now, boxing is not quite the same as it once was. When Muhammad Ali, as he mentioned, when he was champion, he fought all the time. There was, he would fight 5 times in a year. Alexander Usyk, if you could look this up, I want to say as a heavyweight, his whole career as a heavyweight's only been 8 fights so far, or 9 fights. What's he got? Chaz Witherspoon, 2 Joshua fights, 2 Fury fights, 2 Dubois fights.
Chisora.
That's 8 fights, right? So yeah. I think that, so he's had in the few years he's been as a heavyweight, he's only been fighting like twice a year generally. And I mean, yeah, the thing, I think the reason that you might say that the resume, if you believe this, is a little bit thin is because even though he's beaten Joshua and Fury and Dubois, he's beaten the same 3 guys a total of 6 times. So, but that's still impressive because he had to go back and do rematches with with all 3 of those guys, and he won all 6 of the fights. So I mean, how can you fault him for that? So, I don't know if the word thin is accurate. I think it's just that it's not as deep partly because of the general, this is not just Usyk, the general inactivity of top heavyweights and frankly most top fighters in the sport today, generally, whatever division you're in, and that the heavyweight division, while it's a good division, and I see these comments, I'm not talking about from Max, but in general, people talk about how it's such a terrible. I think we've talked about this before. I think this is one of the best heavyweight eras in boxing because if you study the history of the heavyweight division, there are very few great heavyweight eras. There's a few, of course. We could talk about, the 1970s that were led by Ali and Frazier and Foreman. We could talk about, the let's call it the 90s or the late 80s. You're talking about the post-prison Tyson, Lennox Lewis, the second career of George Foreman, Riddick Bowe, Michael Moore. Plenty of top heavyweights around. And then guys that don't even maybe get the love, like a Ray Mercer and Razor Ruddock and folks like Evander Holyfield, obviously, that was a tremendous era, and they were all fighting each other. Tommy Morrison was involved in a lot of those scraps. And then you got to the Klitschko era where they were so dominant, the brothers, that whoever they faced, they wiped out, whether you thought they were good or bad. But now we got an era where there's been a lot of competitive, a lot of good matchups, a lot of exciting fights. And you're talking about Fury, Wilder, obviously Joshua, Alexander Usyk has emerged, a little bit later in that era. Not to mention Joseph Parker and Cabiel and some of these other guys that are in and around the weight class. So I don't know why people say it's a bad division. I think it's a really excellent division. There's tons of competitive matchups. All you got to do is go take a look at the stable of the Queensberry they've got together. They've got tons of good heavyweights to make matches. So maybe it's a little bit not as deep as some other times in boxing, but I still think Alexander Usyk has put together a really good heavyweight run. And of course, if he beats Fabio Wardley, that's just another good notch, in terms of when you're looking down that resume. But the good thing, if you're a boxing fan, is Usyk says he's going to fight for 3 more years till he's 41. If he does stick to that and he fights twice a year, that's going to give you another, two times over the next 3 years. That's still, another number of bouts that can add to the depth of whatever you think of his resume presently. I mean, that would be another, I guess 6 fights if he got in the 2 a year. That'd be a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Now, I do want to do a hard segue left. Obviously, Max Kellerman has his opinion. Now, somebody else that has a strong opinion is Eddie Hearn. Now, I seen his post-fight in the ring with Boots Ennis a couple of weekends ago, saying that this is the pound for pound number one, or going to be the pound for pound number one. He's going to rule boxing, the face of boxing. You watched the fight, I'm guessing, against Lima with Boots Ennis. I don't know what you made of the fight and what you thought of Lima as an opponent, but I mean, you can only beat who's in front of you, and Boots done it in less than a round. So when Eddie Hearn says that, now we know Eddie Hearn is quite hyperbolic when he speaks about his fighters.
No, is he really?
I don't know if you knew that, Dan, but I think he is.
He's doing his job. I mean, he may genuinely believe that about Ennis, but even if he didn't, that's his job to do when you're the promoter. Your job is to pump up your guys, to be the person that shouts it from the rooftops, to get the public interested. And look, you could say whatever you want about Eddie Hearn. One thing you cannot take away from Eddie Hearn is he is a great promoter in the sense of the definition of the word. If you're his guy, he's going to get there to your event, or even before your event. He's going to sing your praises. He's going to tell anybody that will listen. He'll do 1,000 interviews, whether it's an internet person, a newspaper person, a YouTube channel, you name it. He's going to tell you how great their guy is. So now Boots appears to have the kind of talent that Eddie talks about. I think the disconnect between people like myself that really don't give Ennis credit for that fight against Lima because it was such a garbage matchup on paper, and in what the reality of what Eddie has been saying is, two things can be true at the same time. Hold on one second while I disconnect this. Two things can be true at the same time. You can be a brilliant fighter and have all kinds of outstanding, potential, and be involved in, and have the possibility of being involved in these mega fights. But you have to prove it at some point. So here's the thing about Ennis. All that I just said before, yes, he has obvious talent. Yes, there's going to be, especially now that he's 154, which is a really good weight class, he has the chance to be involved in some very good, interesting fights. First and foremost, the one that everyone is talking about is Virgil Ortiz sometime early next year, assuming that Virgil Ortiz is successful and uninjured against Erickson Lubin coming up in a few weeks. But there's also the other side of that equation, which for all the potential, all the things you might see, he hasn't yet done it. So his basically his resume boils down to he had a nice win against Danny Onus. That's basically it. Now, that is not necessarily Ennis's fault. He has people that make decisions, business interests that he has to deal with. He was involved for a while in a difficult management / promotional situation. So I'm not laying the blame necessarily just at his feet, although he did have some input in what kinds of fights he would take. But now it's time for him at this stage to and it's like Eddie made the point, no more bullshit fights. Now we're doing real fights. So if it's Virgil Ortiz, fine, line them up. If he wins that fight, there's a ton of other guys in that weight division, other guys with belts, other guys with names. So, I thought absolutely nothing of the Lima fight. I said it, I wrote it. I know Eddie name checked me a few times as I was informed in other interviews because I was very outspoken about what a piece of shit it was. But I'm not anti-Boots. I said that because I'm a Boots fan. I think he's got that kind of talent. I want to see him involved in fights that mean something, that aren't just ridiculously, that just bring, there's no reason for them. And I was proven right, by the way, because he dusted the guy in literally a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever it was. I mean, and he didn't break a sweat doing it.
The Virgil Ortiz fight. Now,
that's a good matchup.
Yes. I was going to say that to you. That's the fight that the US market needs. Something like that, right? Because you've got two guys that I don't know if Virgil Ortiz, is he a Mexican American or is he?
He is. He's born and bred in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. He's got a nice fan base down there. And like you said, that's a good All-American fight. You've got the opportunity for Matchroom with Eddie shouting from the rooftops about the fight. You've got Oscar De La Hoya, Virgil Ortiz's promoter, who can do similar to bring attention to his fighters and to his events. They have that in common, and that's a good matchup. You've got Texas versus the East Coast. The Philadelphia boxing scene. I mean, both good areas for fights. I mean, I think they could put that fight in just about anywhere in the country, and it would do good about a business. That's like a good fight. They could if Boots would go to Texas, they would do a big crowd. If Virgil would come to the East Coast, to Philly or Atlantic City or something like that, they would do a big crowd. You could put that fight in New York. I believe it would do a good crowd. Put that fight obviously in Las Vegas, it would do a nice crowd. So, I'm hopeful that that they'll get that done. No, it's all predicated on what happens coming up in early November, because while Ennis was in a mismatch against Lima, Virgil Ortiz is not in a mismatch, at least on paper, against Lubin. Lubin is a reputable fighter. He's been in the ring with a lot of good fighters. He's a very tenacious guy. He's got power. He's got a lot of skills. I mean, he's a good, legit contender. This is not a guy that's there to get rolled over like Lima was. So he's got to take care of that. And I think the more that Lubin, if he's paying attention to what people are saying at all, like, that's got to motivate him to know that basically everybody's saying, hey, my guy who I'm fighting in a couple of weeks, he's all set and ready to go fight Virgil Ortiz. I mean, rather to go fight Boots Ennis, but he hasn't dealt with me yet. So there's that aspect of it. And by the way, if Erickson Lubin is the winner and it's a good fight, I mean, I don't think it may not be as big of a fight in terms of like the publicity, but as far as if you're a diehard fan, either a rematch with Virgil or let Lubin go fight Ennis. In fact, Ennis, when he finished off Lima, he was asked about the Virgil Ortiz fight. He was saying in the ring, hey, and if he doesn't win the fight and Lubin wins, I'll fight Lubin. And then he started naming all the other guys in the weight class, like Fundora and others that he mentioned. Xander Zayas, who has one of the belts, as does Fundora. So feels to me like, at this stage of the game, Ennis is ready to just go in there and fight whoever. And Virgil, just look at his recent fights. He's been willing to fight top guys. He fought Boachuk. He fought Madrimov. He's fought others. So, let's go.
Let's go indeed, Dan. I mean, like, I like what I'm hearing from Boots Ennis as well when he says that sort of stuff. Like, he seems like he's ready now to just fight whoever's got the belts and become that undisputed champion. And it's, the 154 division is a tasty division to be in right now. You mentioned Zayas, you mentioned Fundura, you've got Virgil Ortiz, you've got Boots. Those four could make this division probably one of the most exciting divisions in boxing right now. For
sure. And it's really funny when you say that about who's got the belts. The interesting thing about it is, if it does materialize, and it is Ennis against Ortiz under the current circumstances, it would actually not be for one of the major world titles, because right now, neither one of them has a full title. You have Virgil is the WBC's interim champion, but Fundora has got the full title. Boots Ennis was allowed to fight for the interim title against Lima for some unknown reason of the WBA. So now he's the WBA's interim champion. And once Terrence Crawford left the weight class and Abbas Baru was upgraded to the full title holder, he's got the full belt. So I don't know, is this a thing? Can you do a interim title unification fight? I mean, it's kind of a joke, but it doesn't, at this stage, like in that situation, the belts are like, they don't matter. I mean, both these guys can make a lot of money and give the public a fight they want to see.
Dan, I want to ask you, right, in the media game that we're in, we like storylines, we like characters, and because we like stuff to talk about. Now, I was with Eddie Hearn in Belfast, and he was talking about the Dana White stuff. Dana White's came back. Now, Eddie Hearn's released a video. I don't know if you've seen it on Instagram. We like these storylines, but what do you make of all this so back and forth between Eddie Hearn? Because they're two big characters with big mouths that could probably go on and talk like this for forever about each other. So for me, I like it. I don't mind them two going at each other because it keeps me talking about it. But what do you make of it all?
Let them go at it. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything in terms of what happens in the boxing ring. Is it a good diversion? Is it kind of funny at times? Yeah, sure. But really what it does, if that's what's garnering the attention from the boxing public right now, all it means is there's not a lot of fights to pay attention to. When you have to rely on a nonsensical spat between promoters to fill your the time you allot to spend thinking and dabbling in boxing media content, that's an indictment of the sport. So my recommendation would be for both Dana White and for Eddie Hearn to not worry about each other, to go out there and make the best fights they can for their companies and for their broadcast partners and for their teams, and let the chips fall where they may. Now, but I understand these are competitive A-type personalities. Dana White didn't come into boxing thinking he's going to take a backseat to anybody after all of his great success in MMA and UFC. And certainly same goes for Eddie Hearn, to see somebody else come in and, come on to what he believes is his turf and start making, a lot of comments and things that he's planning to do in this. Now, of course, they're going to go back and forth. And by the way, not the first time. I mean, I spent the early days of my career listening to Bob Arum and Don King go back and forth with each other. So this is nothing new. This is par for the course. Is it interesting at times? Yes. But I prefer to think about the types of fights that can be made or the fights that are happening, as opposed to hearing, just the stuff to come out of the promoters' mouths. They don't get in the ring. They do the business. They're not even hyping up a fight. They're hyping up the fight against each other. If they really want to make a splash, let Dana White who seems he's in good shape, and Eddie Hearn, who's in good shape. Let them go into the ring and do their business with each other. They can make a big charity event out of it. I'd watch that for sure.
Me too. I tell you what, so would I, Dan. So would I. You mentioned there about fights being made. What fights? Obviously, we're coming to the tail end of this year now. But looking at what fights have been made and the cards that we're looking forward to, we've got Saudi coming up with Devin Haney and Brian Norman and Benavidez Yard. We've got Moza Talman out in December. What fights are you personally looking forward to for this year?
Well, of the fights that are still that are already made, and I think the calendar is pretty much. I'm not saying there won't be a couple other fights made, for December, but I think what's on the calendar right now is pretty much, in terms of the bigger fights, pretty much what's there. Obviously, you'd look to. Wardley and Parker is a good fight. My only disappointment in that is they've taken and basically hit it behind a double paywall because number one, it's on the subscription of the Zone, and then off because you have to have you got to buy the pay-per-view. And I think in the UK it's like £24.95, and here in America, an unconscionable $60, which is just insanity to put on that type of fight that has no bearing on American boxing, which comes on at I think 1:30 in the afternoon Eastern time, late morning in the West Coast. That won't do any business in America, which is unfortunate because it does have, intriguing main event. And at least in terms of the American audience, an undercard that's really not anything to speak of. But that aside, I'm interested to see that fight because it's a good heavyweight matchup. But beyond that, look, the November 22nd card that the Saudis and Turkey have put together with the fights you mentioned, with David Benavidez against Yard in the main event, Haney challenging Brian Norman for one of the welterweight titles. You even have I think is a very good fight is Bam Rodriguez against Martinez to unify three of the titles in the junior bantamweight division, and then even the young guys, Sam Noakes against Abdullah Mason for one of the vacant lightweight titles. That's a dynamite card, and I'm super looking forward to that one. And to be honest, it's such a deep show. I think, and I'm not. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess. But I think if you reassess it, that could have easily taken those 4 fights and split it and made 2 shows.
Yeah.
And done it like that, and still gotten a lot of good attention and good publicity because. I feel like sometimes, and I'm not complaining about deep cards, obviously, but there's a fine line because when you load it up that much, sometimes it makes 1 or 2 of those fights don't get the attention that you think they deserve. If you take a look at what's happened over the last month since the Canelo Crawford fight, the boxing landscape has been absolutely dead. The only fight that's really been of any consequence was Ennis, and not because of the match, just because of Ennis. Mm. Imagine if sometime over the last couple of weeks we had even like Haney Norman just on its own, that would have gotten a tremendous amount of publicity just on its own. Now it's jammed up with those other 3 fights. So I feel like the schedule makers and the matchmakers, the broadcasters, they just kind of maybe got to do a little bit better job of spacing them out and allowing the events to breathe a little bit. But that said, look, how could you not be interested to see that November 22nd card? That's gonna create a lot of things going forward into next year because the guys that emerge as winners from that are going to set themselves up for some big stuff in those weight classes.
Anthony Crawler said that as well. I don't know if you've seen Anthony Crawler. He said in a podcast.
Didn't see that.
He basically said similar to what you just said there. He said you've got 5 main events on one card where you could have 5 shows.
What's the 5th main event?
No, that's kind of what he said. He says on the Saudi card, sometimes you've got 5 that could be main event fights on one show when you could have had 5 shows, and all these undercard fighters, all these prospects coming through can get on the undercards and whatnot. But like I said, you can't grumble. We've got 4 great fights that you mentioned on November 22nd. So
and like I said, I like a deep card. Don't get me wrong, but when it's that many, it becomes sometimes counterproductive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
But all that said, if given the choice, would you rather have that type of card or just nothing? Of course, you'd rather have the good matchups. And I give Turkey Usyk a ton of credit just from the standpoint that he has made the fights that fans have wanted to see that would have had no prayer of happening without his involvement. And that's just a fact. You can, whatever your opinions are about Saudi Arabia's involvement or about Turkey on his own or whatever, the results speak. We saw Fury and Usyk twice, and it probably would never have happened if his involvement was not there. And the same goes for other fights, whether it was
Canelo Crawford, the super fight like that, we would never.
Canelo Crawford would have happened. I mean, and even like Better Biev in the undisputed fight against Dmitry Bivol. and then take a look at some of the undercard fights that have happened along the way. So this is not in any way to complain about it. I'm just saying it's great that the fights are being made, but maybe just spacing them out a little bit would be a little better, I guess, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, definitely, Dan. Now, you mentioned that you've done an interview with Dan Parker on your YouTube channel. You want to give that a plug, and anywhere else? Like I said, at the end of every interview I do with Dan, everything that Dan does is his podcast, your newsletter, everything YouTube channel is in the links below this, in the description box below this interview. But Dan, just give your YouTube channel and your your
Appreciate
Substack.
that. Yeah, well, the Substack is where the newsletter comes. That's the bread and butter. That's danrayfield.substack.com. All it takes is your email address, and you get the blasts. You can get either the version that's for free, or you can certainly spend a few dollars a month or buy an annual subscription and get everything that's available. But in terms of the interview with Joseph Parker, my partner TJ Reeves and I, who do a podcast twice a week, which is on like all your podcast platforms, whether it's Spotify or Spreaker or wherever, Apple. That Joseph Parker interview is on a recent episode, but we also have our Big Fight Weekend YouTube channel, which the video is there also, so you can see Joe and I. And it's not the whole full show; it's just the interview of me and Joe talking. It's like 15, 16 minutes, but Joe's a really good interview. I've interviewed Joseph Parker many times. I've known him for many years. I've covered fights of his in the United States, and he's a good interview, and he's got a great sense of humor. And he was well spoken in our discussion about his reasons why he believes he should get the Usyk fight, and the types of things that he was thinking about in terms of the heavyweight division and how the fight will go, all that kind of stuff. So, it was a good time. I very much enjoyed. I mean, I interview guys a lot. I mean, we do interviews on the show all the time. But the Joseph Parker interview, which was conducted probably about 10 days ago or so, thereabouts, 2 weeks ago, really, really fun to talk to him.
Like I said, the link is in the description below this one. Dan, as always, I always appreciate your time. I always thank you for giving up your time to speak to me on this, because I do appreciate your opinion and the way you break down fights and talk about the fights, and your love of the game. You just love the game, and I like that. And I like that. So appreciate your time as always, Dan. And no doubt, hopefully I can get to speak to you sooner and not wait 3-4 weeks like this time. But Dan, have a great day, mate, and I'll speak to you soon.
All right, Andrew. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
In this sport, you don't wait for judges to decide your fate. TenexToken puts you in control. Stake instantly, speculate discreetly, and keep your moves private. Register now for your share of the $250,000 prize pool. Multiple winners, bigger chances. TenexToken.io. Terms and conditions apply.